This is
Tanya.
and yes, and today. Well, hopefully you're always mom because we don't ascribe to that change it at a whim theology, or is that? I guess that is a theology of some. It's how you believe in God. You believe you are the God of all gods. This music just makes me feel so happy-go-lucky.
That's nice.
Yeah, it's good stuff. Anyway, so good. I'm going to turn it off. Goodbye, music. Welcome to this edition of Ask Mom.
Dad. You need to start saying Dad and Mom. That way it'll be just.
Why don't you just start?
It'll
You
just
do it.
Smooth off of the.
Try it. You lead this time.
The
Welcome.
next episode of Ask Mom
And Dad.
There
See,
you
that
go.
works so much better. We should do it that way because, I'll say hello and welcome. This is fine. We'll
to
practice.
the new episode of Ask Mom. I didn't know what you were cueing.
It's like,
Sorry.
I got to do the
I missed my cue.
Ask Mom and Dad cue take 72. That's how old we'll be when we finally figure out how to do this properly.
That's definitely true.
That's right. We want to thank all of you guys for tuning in every single time we do this and listening to us because we have such a predictable schedule. We have been really crazy doing the Ask Grandma and Grandpa kind of thing last several weeks now, and just kind of once you get out of the rhythm of things, it's hard to re-rhythmic your rhythmics.
We turn to rhythm.
See, you can't see, and then there's just days you can't say rhythm.
And there's days it's really hot outside and you don't even feel like getting out of bed hardly.
We are in one of the hottest weeks of the summer. As a result of that, we are motivated so much to do so many things. That motivation almost gets us to do
out of bed.
Yeah. Listen, we want to get back into the groove of this. Last time we talked about.
I'm struggling just like my tomatoes.
You're
Can't decide if the heat's going to help or hurt.
Yeah, I know, right? We don't want to get into the tomatoes. That's just another depressing. Ask Mom and Dad has not got a How Does Your Garden Grow edition.
Well, that's definitely true.
Tanya, quite contrary.
No.
How does your garden grow? That doesn't rhyme. You need it's Mary, quite contrary. How does your garden grow? And I don't even remember the rest of that. Do you?
Yeah,
remember?
let's not talk about my garden. There's not much to it, so.
Well, there is something to it. There are 2 tomatoes over there, or 1 that you managed to.
Oh, that I picked off that I'm afraid to eat because it's probably the only one I'm going to get. Is that what you mean?
Oh no! Well, anyway, we're trying to say it's so hot outside. The plants aren't even sure they want to respond.
Struggling too.
That's a whole lot easier than saying we're just terrible gardeners, but we're not. We've had successful plants in our lives. But do you really care about any of this? Well, you're still listening, so apparently you do. Anyway, last time, speaking of being a good judge of things, we talked about Supreme Court decisions that had come down, and we went over the issue of whether or not you can force someone to make a product based upon if it was in defiance of your religious beliefs, with the Christian Baker situation in Oregon. And we talked about affirmative action. And we said we would continue to talk about a couple of other things, but I'm not in the mood. But I do want to talk about judging things for a minute. And then maybe you've got some stuff you can want to bring to the top.
Okay, so now
tableau.
Judgment on things? Or
Judgment of things. One thing that has always been a real taboo of mine is the lack of hesitancy that people reserve in judging other people. How do you know when it's a good idea to judge someone, and how do you make a good judgment? Now, we could get into that whole subject, but I really kind of want to just vent about it more than anything. And it all came out of, I also tend to have a tender heart for people who are going through some life transformation, especially sometimes if it's a public figure or someone. And
let me think. Is that maybe your calling in life?
Yeah, it could be that ministry has a little bit to do with that.
To escort people through the difficult times or through difficult life choices that cause them to need Jesus.
Well, the Bible
realize they've rejected him.
Yeah, the Bible doesn't tell you not to judge people. It tells you to judge people in the same manner in which you would like to be judged yourself, which I think is kind of funny because if people really grasp that concept, I think they'd be more hesitant to judge. But they don't seem to be. The Bible tells you to judge all things. It tells you you have to make good judgments about relationships, about whether your tomatoes are going to work this season, whether it's worth it to plant them or to tend them or to try again.
Those are judgments. So there's so many angles to that, right?
Well,
because when Jesus said, "Do not judge, so that you won't be judged," is he meaning that? like you just said, for the judgment you use, you'll be judged with the measure you use.
Yeah,
Anyway,
with the measure in
but
which you
making
use it.
judgment calls, that's another angle on that. We have to do that daily. We have to make, and those are sometimes decisions. Yeah, I think we have a tendency to cast our what's the way to put that? When I'm struggling with something, I'd rather talk about your struggles, maybe even in that same vein. And if you can be condemned, then that way I don't have to deal with me, right? That way, or
yeah, I think I alluded to this even in the last podcast a little bit about how the tendency of the evil man is to say, "Look over there," when they're facing judgment. But yeah, it's much easier to say if you're pointing at someone else, then people aren't looking at you. And I think that it's an interesting thing to consider that because the beauty of being a Christian is that because Christ has paid the price, he's been judged in our place. We have the liberty to and should treat others with the same measure in which he judged us. It's not just judge others as you wish to be measured. The Bible also says to judge others with the same eye to judgment that Christ used for you, to show the same consideration. So that doesn't mean that Christ doesn't see, that we're not seen to be for who we are. It actually means the opposite. We're seen exactly for who we are, and we're given mercy. And we don't give a lot of mercy in our society, especially towards people in prominent places who may have a life we wish we had or something. The reason I bring all this up is there was this incident that was, I don't know if it was a big deal. It was out on Twitter. She was on Hannity after it happened. Representative, I wrote her name down. I don't know who she is. I just saw it the other day. And anyway, some gal from the low country of South Carolina, Nancy Mace. And she introduced Tim Scott when he was in town for something. And the only reason I know who she is because the memes were covered. I mean, the Twitters and articles and stuff were covered with statements of her saying that, making a reference to the fact that her fiance tried to keep her in bed with her in the morning. And she said, maybe I overshared. And then people just, in the comment sections, just landed all over her.
I think there's two things going on there. I think she probably believes that it was a safe zone for her to share a little too much, but that people would accept her. Because what I've noticed is Christians who are brand new in the faith believe what is said, that they are free, they have been accepted now, and forgiven. So they see themselves that way. However, I was thinking just a few minutes ago how Christians tend to, we judge ourselves. And the Bible says to do that, to look at ourselves. The problem is we forget as we go, maybe as we grow even, how much Jesus has forgiven us for. So we should look just like this same newer Christian who's excited about that and believes that wholeheartedly, so they can talk about their life and hope to get good feedback, but not necessarily feel judged. But yet, it's sad to me that in Christian circles, it's not quite as it isn't always true that it's just going to be a safe place. But I think that's because those who don't see themselves that way don't know how to deal with it. They think Christians are this, and this, and you got to check these boxes.
And that's the case. I mean, this was
right?
a Twitter feed that I ran, and I went and hunted her down on Twitter, and I read her Wikipedia bio, which says nothing about it. She's been in Congress for a while, so she should kind of know better than to put sound bites out there that would get her in trouble. But everyone makes a mistake, and nobody can compare to Donald Trump when it comes to putting sound bites out there that probably shouldn't be out there. But maybe she's learned that you can be immune to them too. But when I looked at it, she only became a follower of Christ in 2019. She's been through a really rough life. And you know why I know this is because if you watch the rest of her 7-minute speech introducing Tim Scott, and the only reason she tells this story the way she does is because her pastor is standing in the audience, and Tim Scott is the one that brought her to Christ, and so she's expressing her gratitude, but she's having this licentious relationship with a boy that she's not yet married to. That's what the whole consent. This was the only clip that got lifted. Now, should she be in a relationship that way with someone that she's not married to yet. Ideally, no.
Or boasting about it.
No, she
That
shouldn't
would
be
the hard
boasting,
part, yeah.
she wasn't boasting. She was trying to be
Yeah,
funny in an
that's
introduction.
What I mean. It was just
and I
more of
think
a, she felt comfortable. And,
yeah. Well, the point of the matter is,
Let her guard
we
down.
don't. Here's the thing: what we don't know is everything about her story.
exactly.
Should she be in that? No, she probably shouldn't be in that. But who am I to at I'm in Tennessee. I'm closer than I was last year at this time, but I'm a state away, hundreds and hundreds of miles away, and we live in this really big society. Making a judgment about where someone's at in the process of their life and what's been changing. We don't know what her pastor's challenging her on, what she's growing through, the struggles or whatever in that person's life. And so judgment in this case, when we talk about judgment, is we don't. How does Christ look at this person? How does we should judge others as we want to be judged. So should we? If somebody saw the dark corners, if I accidentally said something, that I shouldn't have said, or made a comment about something that was, then I would like someone to show me a measure of grace in that. And it just bothered me because I'm thinking to myself, this is stupid. This is just a soundbite people are trying to take advantage of. She did fine. She blew it off. She was on Hannity that night. Hannity apparently led into his show showing that quote, made a joke about it, and then they went on and talked about something completely unrelated. And so, and then some people made jokes downing Catholics, whatever. She's not a Catholic. She's a Protestant. So Hannity's Catholic, but it was just I don't know.
Well,
I was just, like I said, it just got under my skin. It's like, you don't know this person. Yeah, maybe she shouldn't have said that, but
I think
look at the context of her
say
story. Her
is,
story was beautiful.
And
it was worth listening
the
to.
bottom line is she felt safe to say something that might not have been like perfectly gone through a cleaner, to make sure it was said correctly. But she was with Christians who probably do need to hold her accountable. I don't think there's anything wrong with accountability. But who, instead of first, like you just said, finding out her story and talking to her, or building a relationship that says, now I have permission to speak into your life, or reminding her, they could even remind her gently that she's going to be going down the same path again if she's not careful because of decisions she's made in the past, which you said have landed her in some difficult places. But instead of Christians, but that's the whole social media trap in the first place, isn't it? Because people can say things that don't have to be tied to a relationship, so they don't have to be accountable to what they're saying, that could either, number one, need more compassion, kindness, whatever, said in a different way that someone can receive better, or reflect back on themselves. So they can put it out there without any kind of judgment, as you say, as we were using. But I think it's sad because all kinds of opinions about Christians get formed through stuff like that. And the saddest part of it is she probably is a new enough Christian that her focus is on Jesus, who the woman at the well, right in front of her, Jesus said, I know these things about you, but I want to offer you living water. So in the middle of her situation, Jesus offered her living water. Well, actually, we don't even see him say to her, now make sure you leave the current man you're with because you're not married to him, and go do all these things. She just wanted to go tell everybody, I met Jesus.
Yeah, as a matter of fact, she
So
quoted
that makes
from
me think.
Jeremiah, which I thought was interesting. She said that when she went to that church, she was sitting in that pew, she heard Jeremiah 6:16, which says, stand at the crossroads and look. Ask for the ancient path. Ask where the good way is and walk in it, and you will find rest for your souls. And she said, the rest of it says, but you said we will not walk in it. But she was in that place where she said, I need to look for the ancient path and walk in it. And that brought her to faith because the pastor was, I guess, talking about that. But the thing is that, it's...
Well, and we know.
We can't ask people to... We tend to judge on points that offend us. Christian people who can be harsh in judgment.
Well, that's what I mean. Because it's usually the person that feels judged themselves. They have to cast that over to someone else. That's what it feels like to me.
Everyone that's saying terrible things about that's probably doing the same thing.
That's exactly
or
right.
Dreaming about it.
I really believe that's usually true because there's no reason to say anything like that. If you're genuinely concerned about her, say a prayer for her, talk to her, lead her, but don't condemn her from a distance. That doesn't accomplish anything. I was thinking about the ancient path thing. those of us who walked with God for a little while know that the ancient path is obedience to his commandments because they're best for us, not
Right.
because we're condemned if we don't. In reality, Jesus says you can't really follow these rules and commandments specifically perfectly anyway. It's why he had to come. But he offers that freedom and that forgiveness, and then says, come follow me. Well, so the people like that who are trying to find their way, it's up to us to help them know what that looks like. What does it look like to follow Jesus? What does it look like to give up those old ways that aren't the ancient paths? They're the paths of the world, or the ways of men around them, or people around you. A lot of people really don't know yet. They just don't.
Yeah.
They don't know. They don't understand that. I mean, I think there's something in the back of everyone's mind that knows that divorce is a worse option, than trying to stay in a marriage. However, so many different situations doesn't necessarily, that doesn't necessarily spell out perfectly. But or this or that thing, we know that there are some Christian principles in our minds or in our hearts. But people who have made difficult decisions or had difficult life choices in whatever ways or whatever things have happened to them have to, from now on, try to understand what it means to follow Jesus. And she may not have been told, now be careful, because if you're, vulnerable to a man who's not your husband, here's some things that could happen, and you need to be careful about that. Just, again, like the woman at the well, who she was probably, in that day and age, probably trying to find livelihood, someone to just give her, literally food and clothing, or food and shelter.
Yeah.
And who knows, also in that day and age, it was usually the man who would write the divorce, whatever, and would send them off. So it wasn't usually the woman's choice that she would be in that situation again. But anyway, so all that saying, yes, walk away from these situations so that you don't get hurt again and get in those situations that are going to cause more stress. But how does it help to condemn someone far away?
Well, and she wouldn't have been in any trouble with anyone had she not used the word fiance. And she just said that her, that her
boyfriend,
maybe
fiance,
called, maybe she just said his name.
partner,
She just said Chris, I think, whatever his name was.
it was a judgment.
And she not well, and had she not made that, because here's the thing, we live in a world where right now marriage. I mean, you're married if you're gay, you can get married, and you can get married if you're. So marriage in the state, in the eyes of the state, doesn't have meaning in the context of Christianity. One woman and one man coming together. What I'm saying is, marriage as we define it, even fiancé stuff. If there's a connection there, and they've decided to move forward in a relationship, which a fiancé has decided to move forward in our vernacular, that means we've committed to each other. Then, in the eyes of the Lord, that marriage, because of their relationship, is happening. It's happened. It's in the process. I mean, I'm not making an argument or a case to say, hey, it's okay to have this extramarital sex. I'm trying to say, at this point, it's a longer conversation. Say, well, what is marriage? And how do we define it? And the term, if we define marriage as a man and woman who've come together and made a commitment to one another and vows or whatever.
I've always said you really should sign up on how many relationships.
If we want to define marriage biblically,
that went that far in high school, you've probably been married that many
You've been
times,
divorced more often
anyway,
than you might realize, is what I'm trying to say. Just because we've got legal paperwork doesn't necessarily define a marriage. Jesus said a marriage is defined, or the Bible tells us marriage is defined when a man and a woman come together sexually. That is the union of a man and a woman, right? So, anyway, the point that I'm trying to make is, guys, you're getting tangled up in language, and you don't know this person's story. Shut up. Judges, don't be missing the fact that God's not done.
Excited.
God has done and is doing a work in someone, and encourage the work to continue. Don't discourage someone by being the very critical person that probably made her stay away from church for so many years to begin with. I mean, you live in the low country of South Carolina, there's been some judgment going on that's probably kept you away from church for a while, because that's what the religious, quote, South has done to a lot of people that we run across in our lives.
Well, that's what's always been so difficult, I think, for churches to have, and understandably, a standard, especially for leaders, that needs to be, put forth and adhered to, whatever.
Yep.
But to not have that standard apply to people who don't know him yet, because they don't They don't know him.
Or who have come to know him and are still working through some of the details.
Say.
That's what I'm getting
And then
at.
then you've got the everyday life of every Christian who battles this or that or struggles with sin, because we have not, the Bible says, until we've really suffered or given up this life, we haven't finished with sin. Sin is still around. It's available. It's fighting us every day.
Yeah. We all
are
have
new
something
creatures,
that's
but
besetting
there's
on us.
there's always a battle. So we're in this battle together. And I think that's what I've struggled with in churches, is we forget that battle every one of us are fighting and facing. So if we could even just understand that and be in the battle together, put our arms around each other and say, man, I know this is tough. And even in this situation, again, you don't say something where it's long distance and all you're doing is spewing condemnation. You if you feel like you can help her, go ask her a question, or go find out what you can pray for her with, or find out, or be excited with her on her newfound faith that God is teaching and leading her, and then try to know how to walk alongside her. I guess, but you're exactly right. I think churches end up having a reputation of things that really Christians, it's not true for real Christians who are really walking with Jesus, finding every day a personal allowing him to lead them. You don't find that as, for some reason, the billboard at church. That it seems to be this or that expectation, or and that's an easy fodder for the enemy to use. Basically, it's what it is. I read this today. I thought it kind of goes along with what we're saying, but it's a post that I just thought was interesting. The top of it, in quotes, said, "Christians are forcing their beliefs on us." So here's the conversation. Secular person says, "I want to do X." Christian says, "You're free to do it." Secular person, "But you think X, whatever that is wrong." Christian says, "Yes." Secular person, "Because you want to control me." Christian, "No, you're free to do whatever you wish." Secular person says, "But you think X is wrong." Christian, "Yes, but only because I want what's best for you." Secular person, "But I want to do X." Christian, "You're free to." Secular person, "But I want you to say that X is good." Christian says, "I can't say that." So the reply is, "Why are you such a hateful, intolerant bigot?" Anyway, so what's funny about that to me is, and how that relates to this, is there are things that we are trying to stand up for, behaviors that are against God's heart, things that hurt him, all this different, how do we love them? How do we love the ones who are basically going against God's laws, and including any kind of homosexuality or transgenderism or any of that says this person is struggling with what's inside and trying to figure out what, and maybe literally has gone against or right opposite of where God would lead them to. Anyway, but it's being interpreted as, so this is almost right the opposite of what you're saying. We're being interpreted as hateful. And yet those, in that instance, those Christians are actually casting toward another Christian as a little bit of hate to me. Because hate itself is not disagreeing with an action, but it is not loving that person. So loving a person set aside from their behavior is one thing. Trying to understand where that person's coming from, what they're dealing with, where they are in the faith, that's another angle on it. So anyway, so in this case, again, it's more about relationships. You can't just throw...
It's kind of funny. I'm thinking here as I'm listening, I'm thinking, we've got all these conversations about things in this society that should not be fluid. Everybody wants to be fluid. And the things that should be fluid, people don't want them to be fluid. In other words, gender's a thing. There's two. There's male and female. That's not something you can change. You can call it, you can rename, you can redefine gender, sex, whatever, but still, there's still two sexes, boys and girls. But when it comes to personal growth, someone developing and changing and maturing as a human being, that's very fluid. That's constantly in thing, which is what people are now redefining as gender as. So your gender is changing. No. You can't
Not
make
based on
biology. You
feeling,
can't make biology something that's shifting. And then I think, and then people are, and the culture wants those things that are fluid, that should be fluid, not to be. In other words, well, you're a Christian, therefore you're perfect now. You think you're perfect, and everything's right, nothing changes. No, I didn't say that. I said that I have a standard that doesn't change, that I'm trying to attain to. And as a result of that,
Or
I find
banking my
myself
life
falling on my nose a lot because I'm human and I'm, as you put it, not done struggling with sin in my life. And no. The world says, no, I want you to say, since you can't, that's some stupid standard because nobody could rise to that standard. So it's okay just to be whatever.
Yeah.
So you're saying it should never change. You should never mature. What do you mean by whatever? Because does that mean that I should go ahead and continue to maybe never get potty trained? Because why should I change? Why should I ascribe to going to the bathroom
and
in
mature,
a toilet and maturing so that I'm not someone's mess to clean up all the time?
I heard a conversation just a few minutes ago too, where all these things are based on feelings. They literally want us to start making proclamations based on our feelings, as opposed to what is real and true. And that's where it gets all, and like you said, by things that don't change, biology, what we know of is that God never changes, and He loves us, but He Himself is a standard, and it's a holy one. And when we are in the right fear of Him versus fear of men, He will be the one we want to conform to. He'll be the one we want to be judged by, but only because He can receive us because of Jesus.
Yeah.
Not because, as they always say, it's level at the cross. Each one of us come to Him the exact same state, depending on, no matter what our sin angle looks like, we all come to Him with exactly the same slate of brokenness.
I think I would say, you say He's a standard. I would elevate that to say He's not just a standard. It's the difference between something that is, I'm not.
Well,
I'm
is
agreeing with what
holiness
you're saying. I'm saying,
saying.
He is holiness, but I'd say, how about putting it in more mechanical terms? If it's functional, everything that is functional is God. Anything that is not functional is less than. In other words, what I'm trying to say is the best everything is coming from that which is perfect, that which is complete, that which is whole and functional and not broken. All of us are saying, the world is saying, well, we're broken, and that must be functional because we're all just human, right? Therefore, we're just functional this way. We should embrace that and continue to dysfunction in our functionally dysfunctional way. And God's going, no, I'm offering you the ability to be functional again. And instead, we choose dysfunction. And I almost think we should do a series or talk about functional families in the Bible because there really aren't any.
Yeah, I know, right?
And we could do an entire Bible study on the subject matter of how to build a functional life on a dysfunctional foundation, on a functional foundation. I don't know how to put it. It's something to think about. Just, let's just look at the dysfunctional people in the Bible.
Again, you can't build until you realize where you are. Who you are based on what is truth is dysfunctional. You need to rely on and sit on something that is functional, something that is whole, something that is holy and reliable. And that is who God has given us as Himself. He's the only one that really does have every bit of it in His hands, all of the perfection, whatever. So you start there, but then that means every one of us are in the same place. We're growing, we're maturing out of hopefully some of the dysfunctional behaviors and whatsoever, but we're still all in that same boat.
Yeah, we're in the same boat, and we should be
get out of there without Jesus.
We should be aspiring to take care of. We should, where we should be a good judge. We should judge ourselves, and we should take that and I think you've even alluded to this.
But when we judge ourselves, when we are in Christ, we are forgiven.
And we should judge.
And therefore we can forgive
and
others.
if we first look at ourselves, I think there's somewhere in Matthew or somewhere about judging others with a stick or an eye or a dusty thing. Dust in your eyes.
You mean removing the log from your own.
Which then gives you the capacity to judge
get out
others.
The splinter and others. Yeah, I've always thought that was a good way to put that, Jesus. I mean, obviously, He's, the best teacher ever was, but because you can't even see someone's little tiny splinter until you
Yeah.
remove that log, and then you can't see it anyway. They have to ask you for help.
It's all out the way. Absolutely.
They're the ones that can feel that splinter.
So that's my rant on judging and other things that were tied up in there. But overall, I think we had kind of a good, brief conversation here about this subject.
And the focus of that should have been prayer. That was a prayer breakfast anyway. It should have been that
Right.
we're praying for God to lead our country again and to find who that leader might be for this.
I agree. And with that being said, thank you guys so much for listening to this. Wait, you do it. Thanks so much for listening to
Ask Mom.
and Dad. We'll see you next time.